If you were to ask me to describe week 8 of the college football season in a singular word, I would say eventful. As week 8 had everything. It had upsets, it had ranked teams pushed to their limits, teams survived and advanced, others could not. And it all began on Friday night. Louisville going on the road and upsetting second ranked Miami. Carson Beck, 4 interceptions. And Jeff Brom, once again, has a top 5 victory. Nebraska entered the rankings going into the week, but Minnesota, they upset Nebraska 24-6. Nebraska's offensive line allowed 9 sacks, and watching that game, I could not believe it was only 9. It felt like to me at least 12 or 13. Arizona State upset Texas Tech. Georgia Tech, they were an underdog on the road against Duke, but Georgia Tech dominant in the second half. UAB, just a week after parting ways with Trent Dilfer, upsets Memphis. Oregon, with a response against Rutgers after being upset at home by Indiana the week prior. BYU remained undefeated. Texas A&M pushed to their limit against Arkansas. Texas survived and advanced against Kentucky in overtime. Missouri survived and advanced against an Auburn team that, despite Auburn now being 3-4, they have been a team that has made you have to play all 60 minutes. And for Missouri, 2 overtimes. Virginia survived and advanced. Washington State, once again, highly competitive against a ranked opponent. Vanderbilt defeated LSU. Vanderbilt was a 2.5-point favorite in that game, but rankings-wise, it was an upset. Georgia rallied in the fourth quarter, down by 9 against Ole Miss. Notre Dame's running game dominant against USC. Penn State and Florida State have now lost 4 in a row. Florida, they parted ways with Billy Napier. Colorado State parted ways with Jay Norvell. And what a week of college football last week. What does week 9 have in store for us? I am Johnny Sports Network, here to provide you with my week 9 college football predictions. The 7 games on the docket for the main 7 for this week: Houston and number 24 Arizona State, number 23 Illinois and Washington, number 11 BYU and Iowa State, number 18 South Florida and Memphis, number 3 Texas A&M and number 20 LSU, number 15 Missouri and number 10 Vanderbilt, and for my personal game of the week, number 8 Ole Miss and number 13 Oklahoma. Without further ado, let's get to the week 9 college football predictions right here on the Johnny Sports Network. Our first game on the docket for this week, Houston and number 24 Arizona State. Houston with just 1 loss on the season so far, a loss against Texas Tech, while Arizona State, they are off of an emotional win over Texas Tech, pulling off the upset. Texas Tech did not have starting quarterback Baron Morton playing in that game. Arizona State, the reigning Big 12 champions, they have struggled at points in the season, but after a win like they had last week against Texas Tech, is Arizona State back? Sam Leavitt returned for Arizona State last week in the upset victory. And wide receiver Jordan Tyson, 8 receiving touchdowns on the season, tied for second most in the FBS. Arizona State is allowing an average of 24.3 points a game, while Houston is only allowing 19 points per game. Houston is not a team that many people talked about going into the season, but with Texas A&M transfer Connor Wegman at quarterback, I knew that Houston had potential to go at least 8-4 this season. Houston's currently 31st in total defense, allowing 317.1 yards a game. My determining factor for this game, as much as I feel apprehensive of sometimes picking teams that had an emotional victory the week before, I can't help but pick Arizona State in this game. And it doesn't matter if it's college or NFL. I do some of the times feel apprehensive in picking teams that had a big victory, emotional victory the week before, but more in college football because they are 18 to 22, sometimes 23-year-olds compared to professional athletes. But Arizona State, they are at home again. And if it was a road game, I would be tempted to pick the upset, but I think with Arizona State being at home, Sam Levitt is back. I think this Arizona State team is back. And I think Arizona State, they win by at least 10 points and cover the 8.5 they're currently favored by. But it has been a very good season for Houston so far. A team that not many people were talking about. But I just think Arizona State, they have all of the momentum right now. Number 23, Illinois and Washington. There's been a lot of times lately where an unranked team has been favored against a ranked team and a lower ranked team favored against a higher ranked team. And this is the latest. Unranked Washington, currently favored by 4.5 against 23rd ranked Illinois. I will not be dishonest. I am surprised by this. I'm at least surprised that Washington is favored by more than 4. If you would have told me going into week 9, if you would have at least told me last week that Washington would be favored against Illinois, I would have thought, okay, probably by 1.5, maybe 2.5 at the most. But Washington currently favored by 4.5. And I did my research for this game. Washington, they gave up 187 rushing yards against Michigan last week. 4.7 yards per carry in Washington's 24-7 loss. Albeit the game didn't start to get away from them until late in the second half. Washington running back Jonah Coleman, 12 rushing touchdowns this season, and Washington is currently 39th in total defense, giving up 332.6 yards a game. For Illinois, quarterback Luke Altmaier. When Luke Altmaier is playing clean football, when Illinois is playing clean football, they have success. 13 touchdown passes to only 1 interception for Altmaier on the season. However, Illinois' offensive line has allowed 23 sacks this season. It could even be more than that. That's just how many times Luke Altmaier has been sacked this season. Against Indiana, Illinois allowed 312 rushing yards. Against Ohio State, only 106. In fact, if you look at the scoreboard against Ohio State and Illinois, yes, it does say Ohio State won 34-16, but stats, overall game numbers, Illinois, they did well defensively against Ohio State. It's turnovers that got in their way. Illinois currently 74th in total defense, allowing 371 yards a game. And I'm going to go with Washington in this game, although I do like Illinois to keep it to within 4 points. This feels like a 3-point game to me. I do think Washington wins. I think that the home field is going to benefit them for this game, but I think if Illinois just plays clean football, then I think they at least will cover the 4.5 points or even win outright, but I'm going to go with the Huskies. Number 11, BYU and Iowa State. Once again, we have an unranked team favored against a ranked team. Iowa State currently favored by 2.5 points. Iowa State, they had a bye week last week. I do think that it is part of it. Plus BYU, an emotional win over Utah last week, a rivalry game, a win against a rival. It's always an emotional victory. Iowa State is on a 2-game losing streak. They are looking to get back in the win column with losses to Cincinnati and Colorado back-to-back going into the bye week. For BYU, running back LJ Martin, 4th in the FBS in rushing yards with 774. BYU is 10th in rushing offense, running for nearly 233 rushing yards a game. They're also 14th in scoring defense, only giving up 15.6 points per game. Iowa State is currently 64th in run defense, allowing 152.2 rushing yards a game, while they are 27th in scoring defense, tied for 27th in scoring defense, allowing 19 points a game. This is a matchup between two quarterbacks, Bear Bachmeier for BYU and Rocco Becht for Iowa State, where they are game managers. They manage the game, and they have managed the games well. Although for Iowa State, despite the back-to-back losses, last season a big reason why Iowa State had success was because of Rocco Becht's ability to manage the games well. And he also did a good job of that in the early part of the season. This is also a matchup between two teams that have had resilience consistently in the last couple of seasons. Both these teams last season, there were multiple times where it looked like they were going to end up losing, but then they rally right at the end and win by one possession. So these are two teams that know how to win close games. They know how to play all 60 minutes. And I think whoever wins this game, I think it's going to be they rally like they have consistently over the last couple of seasons. But I'm going to go with BYU. I know they had the emotional win against Utah last week. And Iowa State, they had a bye week, an extra week to prepare for this game. I just think BYU's running game is going to be the difference in this ball game. Plus, I have gone against BYU in the last couple of weeks, and it has haunted me, and I don't want to do that for a third week in a row. I'm going to take BYU. Number 18, South Florida and Memphis. Going into last week, when looking at the schedule for week 9, this was looking like one of the biggest games of the week. And it still is. However, with Memphis losing to UAB last week, it has really taken out a lot of the flavor for this game, because this game was slated to be the biggest game of the season among the group of 5. And if Memphis would have taken care of business against UAB, whoever won this game was going to be in the driver's seat for the automatic playoff bid for the group of 5. Right now, South Florida is in the driver's seat for that group of 5 playoff bid, as South Florida only has one loss on the season, and it was against Miami. And South Florida, they played big time competition in the early part of the season, upset wins against Boise State and Florida on the road. South Florida is 7th in scoring offense, averaging 41.7 points a game. They also run an average of 74.9 plays a game, 5th in the FBS. While Memphis, they're 14th in scoring offense, averaging 38.1 points a game. The first couple of possessions for Memphis, I would say probably even the first 5 to 10 minutes of this game for Memphis, is going to tell a lot about this Memphis team and how they respond to being upset by UAB. When predicting South Florida and North Texas a couple weeks ago, North Texas was a slight favorite when I recorded the video. But then it went back and forth throughout the week. South Florida was then favored. Then it went back to North Texas being favored. And I said the difference in that game was going to be South Florida playing the more competitive competition in the non-conference portion of the season. And I think it's the same case here. I think South Florida playing against Boise State, Florida, and Miami in the non-conference part of the season is going to pay off for them. And I like South Florida with Alex Golesh. I do think it's only a matter of time until he's at a Power 4 school. And I think South Florida, they win by at least 4 points. I just don't know how Memphis will respond after being upset last week. I'm going with South Florida to win by at least a touchdown. Number 3, Texas A&M, and number 20, LSU. Texas A&M, 7-0 for the first time since 1994. 1994 was also the last time A&M won in Baton Rouge. LSU will be without starting left tackle Tyree Adams. A&M has been held back by penalties this season quite frequently. They're averaging 8.1 penalties a game, the 12th most in the FBS. Mario Craver leads the way for Texas A&M in the receiving corps with 668 receiving yards on the season, the most in the SEC and 6th in the FBS. The Aggies are without running back Le'Veon Moss for the time being, but Reuben Owens and Jamarian Morrow are averaging over 5 yards a carry, while E.J. Smith averaging 6 yards a carry. LSU allowed 239 rushing yards against Vanderbilt last week. And A&M pushed to their limits by Arkansas, a game that over the years has been very close. 268 rushing yards allowed against the Razorbacks last week. And that was a game where A&M, they started to get back into their early season form where their defense was struggling, giving up a lot of yards. LSU is 26th in total defense, allowing 311.6 yards a game. They're averaging 20.5 points per game against FBS opponents this season. They had 24 last week against Vanderbilt. And even though LSU lost last week, they struggled against a struggling South Carolina team. I do think in these last 2 weeks, we have seen LSU's offense improve a little bit. They've improved a bit in the last 2 weeks, as they should have defeated South Carolina by a lot more. It was turnovers that prevented them from scoring more points. The Tigers are 9th in scoring defense, allowing 14.6 points per game. With this being in Baton Rouge at night, I'm going to go with the upset. A&M is currently favored by 2.5 points. And when all the games were said and done last week, I expected LSU to be favored by 1.5 points. The crowd in Baton Rouge, they're going to be on their feet. They know that LSU's season is on the line with 2 losses so far this season. And I'm going for LSU to pull off the upset. Yes, A&M has been winning games, but I've been noticing with their style of play in these last few games, they can't be having that style of play against the LSUs, the Missouris, even against Texas and the other SEC powerhouses. I do think we're going to see the most points that LSU has scored in a game in a while. I do think the Tigers will be able to put up at least 30 points in this game. Number 15, Missouri, and number 10, Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt with an emotional victory against LSU last week, while Missouri, it was survive and advance. They had to rally against Auburn in double overtime. Auburn really pushing Missouri to their limits. Auburn has been a team that has pushed teams to their limit this season. The Tigers are 10th in total offense, averaging 486.6 yards a game. They're 5th in total defense, allowing only 243 yards a game. Running back Ahmad Hardy, he is 3rd in the FBS in rushing yards with 840 on the season. Missouri quarterback Bo Pribula, he was playing phenomenal in the early portion of the season. After week 2 against Kansas, I thought that if Bo Pribula is playing great, 9 wins could be on the table for Missouri. However, he has been throwing some interceptions lately. 7 interceptions in Missouri's last 5 games. 4 in the last 2 games. And if you're going to win a big game on the road in the SEC, you can't be having turnovers. And Bo Pribula, he's been turning over the ball a lot as of late. For Vanderbilt, for all the chirping that Diego Pavia did in the offseason, going into the season, he has, for the most part, backed it up. They did have the loss against Alabama a couple of weeks ago. However, Diego Pavia, he said it himself. He said that the mistakes he made in that game, with multiple turnovers in the red zone, it helped him learn from his mistakes, understand why he made them, and to move on. Vanderbilt currently averages 7.3 yards a play, which is 7th in the FBS. They average 6.3 rushing yards per rushing attempt, which is 4th in the FBS. This game I went back and forth on. I genuinely think this is a game that goes either way. I have I said earlier that I do feel apprehensive on picking teams that the week prior they had a very emotional win, and I've already done that twice already with picking Arizona State and BYU. I'm going to pick Vanderbilt, and I will once again be picking a team that had an emotional victory the week prior. As with the way Missouri has been playing in their last two games, and with how Vanderbilt has been playing throughout the entire season, with the exception against Alabama, with those two costly turnovers in the red zone, a big difference in that game, I'm going to go with the Commodores to continue this dream season. And if Vanderbilt can win this game, it is a possibility that they could enter the Tennessee game on the final week of the regular season 10-1 with the spot in the playoff on the line. And finally, for my personal game of the week, number 8 Ole Miss and number 13 Oklahoma. I am intrigued to see how Ole Miss responds this week. It looked like they were going to upset Georgia on the road last week, up by 9 in the fourth quarter. But then the tables completely turned and Georgia ended up winning by 8. In what was Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss' first start on the road, this will be his second start on the road. Oklahoma, they responded to a loss in the Red River rivalry with a convincing victory against a struggling South Carolina team. The Sooners are second in scoring defense, only giving up 9.4 points a game. They lead the FBS in total defense, only giving up 213 yards a game, and they're tied for first in the FBS in total sacks with 28 on the season so far. Ole Miss, they are 8th in total offense, averaging 491.9 yards a game. Defensively, however, they're 66th in total defense, so about average, maybe above average, allowing 362.3 yards a game. With Ole Miss losing to Georgia the way they did last week, losing to Georgia, no matter what, nowadays it's like losing against Alabama back in the Nick Saban days. You either respond and respond quickly, or you have that end up being a season breaker. And once again, we are seeing that trend where the lower ranked team is favored against the higher ranked team. But I'm not necessarily surprised about this one. Maybe the fact Oklahoma was favored by 4.5. They did respond well to losing against Texas. I talked about on YouTube Shorts how Oklahoma, they were in the game against Texas, but the second John Mateer interception is what changed the momentum in that game in the Longhorns' favor. I am going to go with Oklahoma in this game. I do like how they responded last week, and I'm just not sure how Ole Miss is going to respond. I don't know what their psyche is going to be like in this game. How does Lane Kiffin get his men ready to go on the road once again this week after losing the way they did, where it looked like they were going to have a big upset win on the road, but then it was just taken from them. Oklahoma had 171 rushing yards against South Carolina last week, while Ole Miss against Georgia They allowed 221 rushing yards on 4.5 yards a carry. And the later on the game went, the easier Georgia's running game made it look against Ole Miss's run defense. I am going with the Sooners. And that will do it for my Week 9 college football predictions. That was the main 7. The best of the rest will be uploaded either Wednesday or Thursday. My NFL predictions for Week 8 will be uploaded tomorrow. My Week 8 takeaways is already uploaded on YouTube Shorts. My takeaways from the NFL this week will be on YouTube Shorts later in the week. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support all season long. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, have a good one.